learning process, and everything becomes easier versus making everything harder because everything's used with pushing and force and compromising the interaction the whole time. So you're accelerating long-term learning and you're promoting the interaction that your children most need to learn. This next principle is incredibly important, and it's a principle that tends up. We have a lot of different kinds of classes in the startup program. Like we have some lecture, we have a lot of interactive activities, we have video footage, we have a slideshow which really demystifies a lot of our children's seemingly random behavior, which is excellent. But we also have something called the question and answer session, and that's basically exactly what it sounds like. You guys can ask any questions you want, we'll answer them. And we get all sorts of different kinds of questions. But we tend to get, in a lot of different programs, we get a lot of different questions, and then in many cases it ends up eventually coming down to this kind of a question of, listen, this sounds like a great idea, this sounds like great stuff, but my child does a lot of really challenging behaviors and aggressive behaviors, and what am I supposed to do about that? I mean, I'm just supposed to join with that or something? How do I handle that? And so, we bring you this principle, because we actually don't join in with those behaviors, because they're not isms. Right? So we have we have this principle. And this principle is helping children unlearn challenging behaviors. Key word is unlearn, because it is not genetically programmed into our children to tantrum in a particular way. It's something picked up as a way to get to operate in the world. And it's because of this. We unwittingly teach them what we most want them to change. I know, doesn't that sound crazy? Why would we do that, right? We don't want to do that. The key word is unwittingly. Nobody does, I know none of you are doing that on purpose. You're trying to help your child and help your own life, but ultimately this is what happens. This is not bad news. This is good news, because if our children have learned it, they can unlearn it. If we've taught it to them, we can unteach them and help them do it in a different way. Now, what happens in a typical situation, right? Typical situation, our child does some challenging behavior. Let's say you have a little girl and she's ripping the wallpaper, the expensive wallpaper off the wall, right? So what do, right? We come in, whoa, honey, no, don't touch it. Well, I thought you were watching. Honey, no touching the wall. Right, so now we've made a whole big Hollywood production out of it. Now, I can promise you very few things, but I can promise you this. She's gonna do it again. She is going to do it again. And you know why? Because you just made that wallpaper really interesting. Now, this is not about your child trying to drive you crazy and make your life miserable. Really, our children become so good at pushing our buttons, sometimes we can feel that way. Like, why are they trying to do this to me? They're not trying to do anything to you. Basically, remember, let's go back to what our children are experiencing. They have massive unpredictability, so they're trying to establish predictability. And we have the celebration and the 3 E's, remember that? Remember I was telling you it was going to come back to bite us later? The key part is that celebration and the 3 E's, remember, big reaction gets you a repeat performance. Doesn't matter whether the big reaction is a happy reaction or an unhappy reaction. Right? Doesn't matter if you're thrilled or really angry. They're both big reactions, they're both incredibly compelling. And ultimately, number one, when I'm ripping the wallpaper, it's like, wow, look at what mommy and daddy are doing. It's like this whole exciting thing. I want you to think, next time you get really ruffled about something your child does, I want you to think, oh, I just celebrated that. I know I didn't like it very much, but I celebrated it. Right? And that is because we gave it a big reaction. The other thing is we make it more predictable, because now, whenever she rips the wallpaper, it's like, stop it, don't do that, stop. So it's kind of like mommy and daddy are light switches. Like, oh, this is cool. Hold on, angry, sad, angry, happy, angry, happy. Okay, so we do this whole thing, right? We set it up in this way to make it incredibly compelling. You know what else we do? And this is actually amazing to watch. We also do the reverse, which is when our children are doing some more sweet communicative behaviors, they're gently tugging on our sleeve, they're speaking sweetly or verbally, right? Those are what we deem non-urgent events. So what happens is then we're like cooking and we're, honey, I'll be right there. No, I see you pointing to that, I will be right there. Of course, she starts screaming a blue streak, what do? Drop the pan, honey, 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 what, right? So we set everything up to actually teach the exact reverse of what we want. So that's not a big deal, because there's a really simple way out. First of all, it does entail a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is this is the new paradigm. When my child is kicking, screaming, yelling. Right? When all this is happening, my child's trying to communicate with me. This is great news, right? This is what we want from our children. My child's trying to communicate with me. Yes! Only one problem though. My child is speaking to me in Russian. Now, for those of you who are fluent in Russian, don't pick Russian. Pick Swahili or some other language. I'm picking Russian because I don't know that language. Okay, but bottom line, when my child's kicking, screaming, pinching, whatever, my child's speaking to me in Russian, right? He can't go down to the corner store and scream and get a pack of gum. Nobody knows what that means, right? So, ultimately, my child is trying to communicate, they're communicating in a foreign language that doesn't work. But, unfortunately, for most of us, we're going, hey, buddy, don't worry about it, I speak Russian. Don't sweat it. Everybody in the house speaks Russian. And, you know, I spent a year living in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden. I took Swedish classes 5 days a week. Every day, 5 days a week, I took Swedish. You know how much Swedish I learned? Not a whole lot. Because every time I'd go out on the town in Stockholm, everybody would understand me when I spoke in English and speak back to me in English. So I just used that as a crutch. There was no reason for me to really work on it. When I spent some time in Spain, though, I had better darn well learn how to ask for where the toilets were in Spanish, or I'm going in my pants. Because most people just did not understand that. And so I spoke that and learned that much faster. And that is the key to realize, because our children are never going to learn to abandon Russian for English or whatever language you're speaking. They're never going to learn to do that as long as we're like, I understand the Russian. Don't worry about it. So we've got to find a totally different way of doing this. We've got to really turn the tables. And this entails us asking a totally different question. See, the problem is most of us ask a question that I call the slavery question. The slavery question is, how do I stop the tantrum? As soon as you've asked that question, congratulations, you've sold yourself into slavery. Because you are now a slave to this tantrum, which you will do anything to stop, and your child will stop the tantrum when they feel like it, when they've gotten the things that they need. And so ultimately, you've now become a slave to this situation, versus asking this question: how can I help my child to communicate more effectively? Not how can I stop this? How can I help my child to communicate more effectively? That might mean your child needs to scream for a while. That's okay. In fact, that might be a really good thing. That might actually help them long term. Now, this is really interesting to see this play out, because a lot of times I can explain this, watch people go home and then not implement it. Right? And the reason for that is because it sounds good what I'm saying, but then you go home and when you're in the throes of it and your child's really yelling and screaming, it's like, oh, I'm like so uncomfortable, I do just want to stop it. And that is why attitude is so important. You cannot implement this principle unless you have the attitudinal backbone of it. And that means, instead of what a lot of us do, which is, this tantrum means something bad about me if I don't stop it, so I have to stop it to show I'm a good mother or a competent teacher. Or we make up other stuff about it, like my child's in deep emotional pain because he's not getting the cookie, and so I have to save my child from this horror, right? And so we do this, and yes, I can totally understand. If you're thinking that, it is really hard to just not do whatever you have to do to stop it. But that's why we have to send ourselves different messages. And we have to send ourselves, okay, my child's trying to communicate, this means nothing about me. The best way I can really love my child, actually, is to help her communicate more effectively so that she can get more of what she wants. This is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. And that leads to, how can I help my child to communicate more effectively? And that's the attitudinal backbone you need to implement this effectively. So it does entail some self-reflection and some soul-searching on our parts to really make this happen. Now, what does this mean? This first one, you see how you see a big challenging behavior with a small response? A lot of people confuse this and think what we're saying in the Sunrise program is just completely ignore it and just don't act like it's not happening. Right? And there are other methodologies that say that. That's actually not what we're saying, though. And a lot of people think, they get concerned too, because they think, does that mean just don't react when my child's doing anything? It does mean this. It means when your child is having an aggressive or a tantrumy kind of reaction, you want to have two things in your reaction. Slow, like you literally want to move slow, talk slow, and mellow, low energy. The opposite of the 3 E's, really mellow. Now again, Of course, people get concerned about how far to take this. Listen, if you're in the kitchen and your child grabs a really sharp knife out of the drawer, right? Here's my recommendation. Take the knife away, right? You don't want to just sit there and be like, listen, I went to Ron's lecture, so knock yourself out, buddy. You do what you need to do, because I'm not really reacting to this. No, do whatever. If it's a safety issue, you take immediate action. But even if you have to do that, there's a difference between taking immediate action and having a big reaction. That's where the problem comes in, right? What most of us, when our child takes a knife out, right, what do? No! Right? Oh, oh my God, you could have cut yourself. What are you doing, right? This whole thing. So yes, you have to move quickly in that case, right? So, but even then, there's a difference. You could go, you know what, I'm just going to put this away because it's kind of sharp, right? So there's even a difference there. But let's be honest, in most situations, your child's not playing with a meat cleaver. So 9 times out of 10, it's actually not going to be dangerous. They're just screaming and maybe they're pinching a little. Nobody's going to die from that. So ultimately, you can react totally differently. And that means, again, it doesn't mean ignoring. Right? I was working with a little girl and she was screaming once and she was doing something like this. I just pointing this thing, she's yelling, right? So I go, sweetie, oh, I know you want something. You know what? I don't understand when you're yelling. If you used your words, I'd understand. Yelling though. Now, yes, she wasn't totally verbal. I'm not saying she understands every word I'm saying, but you'd be surprised. Your kids are gonna get the gist of it. Because then you follow it up and I go, oh, okay, no, let me look. I know you want something. I'm not sure. So I can't understand the yelling. If you used your words though. Just look at that. Is it this? No! Okay, so it's clearly not this. Okay, let me just look. See, I can't understand, but I'm gonna try and help you. Is it this? Right, so I'm still trying to be user-friendly. I'm trying to help her, but I'm kind of dumb. See, most of your problems is you're way too smart for your own good. Like a lot of you can tell the pitch of your child's scream by what they want. You've got to stop that. We've got to all get collectively dumber. This is actually going to help our kids. So I'm just really dumb. I'm just not sure what she's pointing to. And eventually, I might even stumble on it and get it to her. But it's going to take a while because I can't understand her. Now, the key piece, and this is, if you just do this, if you just do that part, what you're going to do is show your child it's difficult to communicate. And you do not want to be sending that message. So you've got to do that side, and you've got to couple it with this side. This is very, very important. So in the same way, now when your child does try to verbally communicate or connect with you in that way, or does something sweetly or communicatively, you've got to react the way you used to react to the tantrums, right? So if that same girl had been going, and let's say, I don't even know exactly what she's saying, but she's trying to talk, right? So then I might say, oh, that was a word. What did you want? What did you want? What's so awesome? Is it this? No? Okay. Wait. Love it. That was great. Here, right? So now I'm running around. Now I'm running around going, what do you want? I'm going to move heaven and earth to get it to you, right? That's the key piece. You've got to do both of those together. And then what starts happening is this plays to your child's intelligence, just like the other principles, plays to your child's intelligence. So ultimately, I have to tell you, I've seen this with lots of children. It's one of the fastest tantrum reduction and elimination techniques I've ever seen. Now, will it immediately eliminate all tantrums? Will your child never scream or tantrum again? No, they probably will. But you know what? They will not use it as a regular form of communication because they will not use a method of communication that never ever works. They're going to start to look for another way to communicate to get more of what they want faster, and you're going to be there to show it to them. You're going to show them what that is, right? And that is the key. So your children will capitalize on this, and this will really help them. And you know, there was a mom in a particular startup program that was like, it's a good idea, I used it, but it doesn't work with my son. It doesn't work with him. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Wow, so what do you do then? I mean, you do it and it doesn't work? She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, explain to us what happens. She's like, oh, well, he wants a cookie all the time, especially before bed, and I don't want to give him a cookie before bed because he'll be up all night and bouncing off the wall, so I don't give it to him. I say, that sounds great to me. I totally agree with that. So what happens? You just don't give him the cookie? She's like, yeah, and I say, sorry, it's bedtime, you can't have the cookie. Okay, and then what does your son do? Oh, well, this is what I'm telling you. He tantrums and kids, and I want the cookie. And he starts flopping around on the floor and this whole thing. I say, oh, okay, so then what do you do? And she's like, I just told you, I do this principle. I say, you can scream all you want, you're not getting the cookie, sorry. I go, okay. So then basically you just don't give him the cookie. He screams all night, you just say, no, I'm not giving you the cookie, right? She's like, yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes there's situations where he's had a tough day and he can scream like that for 2 hours. So obviously when it goes on like that kind of situation, sometimes I have to give him the cookie. So here's the thing. If you're gonna buckle, don't wait 2 hours to buckle. Buckle now. Save yourself some time, and at least don't teach your child they gotta scream for 2 hours to get it. But ultimately, hopefully you won't buckle at all, because you're gonna have a different attitudinal point of view on this. You're gonna really see this as helping your child to communicate. You're gonna stick to your guns, and in the early days, that might mean they scream a little bit. And you know what? They might even escalate when you first try it. They might scream louder or tantrum a little longer, and you know what you wanna be saying? Oh, my daughter or my son is just speaking Russian louder. Doesn't matter how loud it is, doesn't change the language, still Russian. Right? It's so funny. I love watching Americans in foreign countries like in Europe, like go up to some French guy in Paris and be like, can you tell me where the toilet is? I'm like, he's not deaf, he's French. There's a difference. Okay, so loud doesn't mean I understand you. Loud is just speaking a foreign language louder. That's all. I still only respond to English. That's all I know. Right? So that's the key piece. And you know what? I rarely get a person who's sort of like, I promise you I never give him the cookie. I swear to God I never give him the cookie, and he screams anyway. And you know what I say to that? I say, okay, I believe you. But you know what? Somebody's giving him the cookie. Right? Your son's not crazy. Right? Somebody in your house or somewhere else is responding in this way. So you've got to get a lot of consistency here. This, I'm actually just going to touch on this principle extremely briefly, and I'll tell you why. One, because I could spend a lot of time on it and actually go into a lot of detail with you, and I'd rather not take the time to do that right now. Number two is right now the most important thing for all of you anyway is just to get started on some first steps on this principle. In the startup program, we go into a lot of detail on how to set up your child's bedroom or whatever to be this special work playroom to really optimize learning and interaction. Totally, we focus a lot on that. We can help you with that. But now I just want to give you an initial idea of what to think about. Okay, first of all, we have this special playroom that I was talking to you. That was a picture of it. There are some different attributes that mark the playroom. Again, rather than talking about all of them, I'm actually just going to talk about the first one and the last one, because they're the most important ones to keep in mind right now. The first one is it's free from distraction. Okay, that means it doesn't have a lot of sights and sounds. Most of our children are highly overstimulated for reasons that we've discussed already. But the thing is, in our head, a lot of us think, well, I want to take my child to the amusement park or to the playground with the other kids because I don't want to deprive them of a typical situation. So I want to put them in I want to put them in a mainstream school and everything like that. And that's an admirable thought. The idea is good. To try and help your child to have these typical experiences makes total sense. The thing is when you take your child, in most cases, 99% of the cases, when you take your child to those situations, they're not having a typical experience, because they're not able to digest it like a typical child is. So even though they're in a typical environment, look, if that really made a child not autistic, nobody'd be here. We'd just put all our kids in with typical kids, and a few years the autism would be gone. But that's not the way it works. Right? Our children have sensory processing difficulties, and that means most of them are very overstimulated. So rather than thinking, can I get them into a typical environment as soon as possible? We do want that, by the way. The idea is to get your child into a typical environment eventually. But the idea is first, get them so that they can actually digest that, so that they can go back into the playground and be successful there. and actually have a digestible experience there. And that means starting off in a very focused playroom that doesn't have pictures on the wall, that doesn't have a lot of sounds, and is very secluded in the sense that it's a very insular room. To a typical child, it might be considered quite boring, but to our children, it's going to be their haven. It's going to be the place that's going to help them. And you may think, well, God, that sounds a little extreme. Like just putting a child in there, and especially if they're doing the program full time, doing that all day. You know what? It is extreme. It is extreme. It is a temporary, extreme environment designed to get permanent, extreme results. The idea is not to keep your child in there for the next 15 years. The idea is a short amount of time, a couple of years, 3 years, whatever, of focusing on this so that eventually we can help build your child up to a point where they don't need the playroom anymore and where they can operate successfully in typical environments. That's the whole idea of it. The last piece, to jump all the way down to here, no control battles. Another benefit of this is that every time you have to say, no, don't touch that, don't do that, you can't do that, you're compromising the interaction. People get concerned about spoiling their children. This is not a matter of spoiling your children. Yes, when your children are farther along, we can worry about setting boundaries, and we can help you with that, actually. We do that. But in these days, when you're really trying to first build up that level of interaction, you want to have a yes room, where you don't have to say no to anything. And this playroom, it's a very safe place. It's designed to be a place where you can just building and challenging your child and also building more of a deeper relationship with them, etc. And so it's designed to have no control battles. We also have a big focus on internal environments, where we've just noticed it's incredibly important. You know, autism is a neurological disorder, but it has a lot of relations to immunological, gastrointestinal, and biophysiological issues that our children have as well. So it's really important to take this into consideration. I still hear, I wish I didn't, I still hear a lot of pediatricians and things telling people, listen, your child has a neurological disorder, it's autism, nothing they eat is going to make any difference. That is just simply false. I mean, I can't say that in a nice way, it's just not true. Actually, if you go to autism conferences and you talk to any of the scientists who are at the leading edge of autism treatment, they have concrete evidence showing exactly why and how what your child eats absolutely affects their neurological development and absolutely should be paid attention to. Who here has heard of a gluten and casein-free diet? Oh, good, most of you, excellent. There's lots of foods your child may be sensitive to. These are the first 4 groups to consider. Gluten, a complex protein in wheat and other foods. Casein, a complex protein in dairy, and milk products in particular. A lot of those are large proteins. They go in, they don't get properly digested by your child, who in some cases, not all, has a leaky gut, which basically means there's like little miniature holes in your child's small intestine. So the protein goes into your child's bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and actually binds to the same receptors in your child's brain that heroin and morphine bind to. So some of your children are quite literally on drugs from these foods. And if your child is a child that's really just likes grilled cheese and milk, then instead of thinking, well, that's all my child eats, what you want to be thinking is, that is a sign of addiction when a child eats like that. So that probably means they are having a problem with gluten and casein. And to address it, you can't just cut down the gluten and casein. You actually have to get it to 0. So there's different ways. We can help you with that too. We focus a lot on that. Also, caffeine and sugar. Caffeine's a nerve stimulant. You don't really want to be giving your kids that. Sugar is, many of our children have hyperinsulinism, oversecretion of insulin in relation to sugary foods, or they have candida yeast infections, which is a candida yeast overgrowth in their intestines, both of which inhibit brain function when they eat simple carbohydrates and sugars. So those are some basic foods to start to look into right now. A note on some overarching concepts that I think you're going to want to know in order to make these principles stick. Just 2 of them actually. One is a lot of you raised your hands to say that you're professionals. You know, I'm a professional too in the same field, so I really feel a sense of camaraderie with you, that you've devoted your life to the same thing that I've devoted my life to, and we've had the chance at the Autism Treatment Center of America to work with so many of the most dedicated and helpful and incredible professionals. At the same time, we have actually seen nothing. I mean, we have seen nothing that can equal the power of the parent as a force for change in their child's life. We just haven't seen anything to match it, because nobody loves your child the way you love them and has the kind of dedication that you have. Nobody can match that. And nobody has the long haul commitment that you have, because you're in it for life. And you know what, to be totally honest, no 4-hour evaluation can match the day in, day out experience that you have as parents with your own children. So a lot of parents feel really pushed aside in this whole process. We actually try and have the opposite focus, which is not only do we not push parents aside, we really try and focus on parents as the #1 resource for their children, and we give them a central role in their child's Sunrise program and spend a lot of time training parents, because you are the ones who can most affect change in your child's life. Now, I bring this up because sometimes I know it feels really hard, like you feel like you're pushed in a lot of different directions and you're given conflicting information, and you're told you're too emotional and you don't know what you're talking about, and I know that can feel tough, and I guess that I would say, ultimately, you are the parents and you get to decide. And if somebody tells you to do something and it doesn't feel comfortable, it doesn't feel right to you, you do not have to do it with your child. And if you are doing something, like let's say you're joining your child, somebody comes up to you and says, you know what, there's no research for that, that's just gonna reinforce the behavior, but you've been joining and you've seen it work with your child, then you're allowed to keep doing what you see works. We have survived for 1 million years on following our direct observations of what works and what doesn't. Human race did quite well on that for a while. Then about 30, 40 years ago, we've decided that's not important anymore. All that matters is institutional published research. Now, I'm not against research. Right? I majored in biomedical ethics. How could I possibly be against research? In fact, research has given us penicillin and lots of life-saving things. So talk to doctors, go on the internet, find all this stuff out, but don't let the research decide the future for your child. It doesn't get to decide that. Only you get to decide that. So that's a key piece that we really try. You know, one of the biggest changes I do see in parents in the period of the 1 week that they're at the startup, before they've even gotten a chance to implement all this with their children, is that they really come into their own and really see themselves as a much more powerful advocate for their own children. And it's so cool to see it, to watch it happen. Whenever I bring up attitude, I often have this experience of people saying, you know what, don't talk to me about attitude, just show me what to do. Just show me what to do, I'll do it. But the thing to realize is the attitude is not apart from the techniques. It is a part of the techniques. And it is quite specific and very concrete in the benefits that it brings. It's so important to look at this. And yet at the same time, we're given all these messages that are counterproductive for us. So the thing that we found most important is focusing on not judging our children's behaviors today, really not judging where they are, while at the same time really believing they can go anywhere tomorrow. Now again, the thing about this is that we are constantly fed these messages about that our children are tragedies, that it's really sad that you have the children that you have, or other people even saying, oh, I'm so glad I don't have a child like that. Now, here's the thing. You know, my father, when he wrote on the second page of the book, Sunrise, the Miracle Continues, this quote that I love. For us, there was the question, could we kiss the ground that the others had cursed? And you know what? I love that quote. I love it. Because, you know, that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to kiss the ground that maybe for right now the rest of the world curses. Do I wish that on you? Would I want the world to talk about or think about your children that way? Absolutely not. But